Hello, I'm David Hepworth. Thanks for clicking this word in your ear, the latest of hundreds of chats Mark Allen and I have had over recent years, some between ourselves and others with musicians, authors, comedians, and other people we like. If you'd like to help make sure they continue, you might consider being a Patreon supporter by visiting patreon.com/wordinyour-ear, or just by liking or subscribing in whatever way you prefer. On with the show. Okay, welcome to this special Word in Your Ear. I'm going to start with a list, if you'll forgive me, if both bear with me. And the list begins, it goes Harold Wilson, Edward Heath, Harold Wilson again, James Callaghan, Margaret Thatcher, John Major, Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, David Cameron, Theresa May, Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak. Keir Starmer is the first Prime Minister since Harold Wilson in the mid-60s who can say there is no Fleetwood Mac at the moment. You know, yes. throughout the reigns of every single one of those prime ministers, the constant in our lives has been Fleetwood Mac. You know, particularly since the death of the late Queen, I suppose. You know what I mean? It was just one of those things that you could always depend on. There was always a Fleetwood Mac somehow, and so that the richness of their relationship with all our lives is reflected in this new book, Dreams, The Many Lives of Fleetwood Mac, by Mark Blake. Mark, who joins us now. Hello, Mark. You all right?
Hello there.
Lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you both.
So when did Fleetwood Mac first enter your mind? You know, can you remember your first memory of Fleetwood Mac, or were they always a fact of life for you?
No, I would have heard them in the 70s. I would have heard songs from Rumours. But what I would have heard before that would probably have been Albatross. I definitely remember hearing Albatross on the radio as a very small kid. And I probably didn't even make the connection that it was the same group. And then it was seeing the cover of Rumours and the cover of the White Album, the Fleetwood Mac White Album, in record shops when I didn't have money to buy records.
Right.
They'll be plastered over the windows. I just distinctly remember this strange picture of sort of Mick Fleetwood with these sort of dangling balls from his belt, and Stevie Nicks as a sort of ballet dancer.
Later sold for $128,000 at an auction.
That's right. Yeah, I mean,
that's the quantity of detail you get in this book.
that's it. Absolutely. Well, Mick goes bankrupt quite often and has done a few times. So I think he sort of, you know, he's sold a lot of stuff at auction recently. But yeah, my memories would have been Albatross and then the cover of Rumours, I think, maybe even before hearing it.
And you've talked to all of them, haven't you? I mean,
all of them, many times.
Musically, but as a journalist, you've been interested in them as a story, and you've interviewed all of them, including, I think, Peter Green at one point.
I think I did the last magazine interview Peter Green ever did, and that was in 2012. And his people were trying to get him working again, and it didn't happen. So whether that was to do with the quality of the interview, I don't know. But
you put it off.
It was in his lawyer's office with his lawyer there and his man Friday. I think it was a guy called Paul. And it was quite a difficult encounter.
I was going to say, what a relaxing setup.
It was
for an
not
interview.
A relaxing setup. Sat down, I thought,
Peter Green's lawyer,
and his man Friday. Oh, God.
And his man Friday. Already, I'm feeling really tense.
I remember sitting there. It was in Covent Garden, and the lawyer was lovely. I have to say, she was lovely and very, very helpful. But it was excruciating. And he was jolly. He was jolly and funny, and then he'd suddenly zone out.
Yeah.
He just suddenly, it was as if someone had detuned the radio, and then he'd come back again. But he was very aware of his condition, which was the sad part of it.
No, sure.
He was making jokes about it. Yeah, I mean, I remember reading your interview, Mark, and it was the same experience, I think.
Oh, I think I might have had a little weep after I put the phone down, actually, because he was absolutely one of my greatest heroes. It was just very, very sad, I felt.
So let's just give people an idea of this book, because this isn't the conventional Fleetwood Mac story, you know, that you might be expecting. How would you describe what this book is? Did you say a mosaic biography?
I've been told it's a mosaic biography, and there's a few of these floating around. Tom Doyle did one about Kate Bush. I also read Craig Brown's books, 1, 2, 3, 4, which I think the Beatles, which took a similar approach.
Yeah.
I also long before that, I read his book about Princess Margaret.
It's a fantastic book.
It's fantastic.
The one and only book I've ever read about the royal family. It'll be the first and the last. But I think it's just it's lots of little stories. It runs chronologically. There's profiles of all the band members, but it will go off at a tangent. It will talk about the time Rod Stewart got thrown out backstage at the LA Forum by Fleetwood Mac. It will talk about the influence they had on status quo. It talks about the dog on the cover of Tusk, things like that. So
that's the important stuff.
I think that's the important stuff.
Yeah, never mind the albums. No, you've got all that.
Listen, I think that's really good because I tell you, I got really tired of reading rock biographies where chapter 9 is, and then came their 8th album.
Yeah, their 8th album.
And you're about to get...
This was so-and-so, and they assembled at Rockfield on the 27th of June and had shepherd's pie for lunch. And you think, I haven't got the strength to go on with it.
To be honest, we've all written these things.
But you obviously had tons and tons of story, and you present it. In fact, you start the whole thing with a kind of cast of characters, a dramatis personae, which I thought was a really clever idea. These are all the people, as if they are all, which they are, part of an ever-ending, and currently unended play, really.
Yeah, it's just trying to make it a bit more fun and maybe a bit more accessible. And it was to keep me entertained as well, because we have all I have written assembled at Rockford Studios many times.
But it's particularly difficult with Fleetwood Mac because it's such a long story, and therefore how do you avoid it being repetitive? With
great difficulty, Dave. Yeah, to be honest, that was one of the challenges of doing it. But it was difficult to do, but it's fun to do it that way. And I think there's big chunks of that story that don't get written about as much. Right. The period where they're not having hits, but they are still making records and touring and waiting to become huge and to discover Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham.
Well, let's just go through those cast of characters, if we may. Just talk about, you can talk about some of your favorite, facts and anecdotes about them. Let's start with the man who gave the thing its name, Mick Fleetwood. Extraordinary person, really, exceptional in all kinds of ways. You never would have backed him to have been the person to hold this thing together.
No, because he'd been fired from John Mayall's Blues Breakers. They'd kicked him out. I don't think they thought he was good enough as a drummer. He'd followed Ainsley Dunbar, which I think was quite a high bar.
Yeah, but
and he bought a set of window cleaners ladders. He was going to become a window cleaner. He had the ladders, but he couldn't get anyone. He couldn't even get a window cleaner's job. And then Peter Green phoned him up and said, "Look, I'm starting a band. Would you like to join?" And I think he's hung on and clung on ever since for, over 50 years. He's utterly devoted to that band. I'm convinced Mick Fleetwood would still tour a version of Fleetwood Mac if Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham would agree to.
Oh, I'm sure he would.
Yeah, 100%.
I think it's a brilliant combination between being kind of apparently rather kind of arrogant about his success, but also I think inside being incredibly grateful for the opportunity, because he never had to be a flamboyant and complex or drummer. He didn't have to do anything particularly, significant, did he? He just had to hold down the beat.
No, not at all. And he doesn't write. He's not really a writer, although he's got co-credits on The Chain and several songs. But he's never been a songwriter. So he's always been reliant on these sort of disparate individuals that become part of Fleetwood Mac, whether that's Peter Green or Lindsey Buckingham or whoever. So I do think there's a sense of gratitude there, and he's a great showman in the sense that he's a great cheerleader for the band.
Yeah,
wonderful old ham. He makes up all sorts of great stories. He understands the mythology. He understands the legend. And I think he's absolutely brilliant at doing that.
He will also do the silly thing, won't he? If you need somebody to do something stupid, he'll do it.
Yes, but involving taking your clothes off or dressing up as a woman.
Saying Fleetwood Mac album, there he is, stark naked behind a tree.
Yeah, that kind of, or dressed as a woman be dragged up. He's happy to do it. Apparently, he often played female parts at school. At his public school that he was at, because he was very tall and willowy and feminine looking. His Ophelia was considered.
Have you seen his Ophelia?
Have you
That's brilliant. I should give Mick Fleetwood will give you his Ophelia.
Let's see it again. I'd like to see it again now.
Yes, gather.
That's fantastic. So, how come? Of course, the other thing is that he's got his name on the group. Now, how did that happen? How did that group, which is started by Peter Green, let's not forget, how did it come to be called Fleetwood Mac?
It was Peter Green's idea to call it Fleetwood Mac. When he persuaded John McVey to come in on bass, I think they did an instrumental originally, which they called Fleetwood Mac.
They did, didn't they?
And he said, you can have the name because in case I leave. I don't think Peter Green was ever planning on sticking around. But it's incredibly fortuitous move and brilliantly beneficial to Fleetwood and McVey, because they were able to take it and run with it ever since.
Yes, it is amazing. And we're reflecting on this because it's, John Mayall has just died when we're talking. That period of time in the mid to late 60s, bands lasted about 3 months, didn't they? A lineup of a band, people would take their name elsewhere. And yet out of that came the longest lasting band of them all, pretty much.
Yes, it's amazing, really. It's the luckiest thing that ever happened to him.
It is. So
there's one moment, I just got to ask one more moment about Mick Fleetwood. It seems so incredible. There's a period when he managed the band. And I think it was around the time of Tusk. I'm not sure they do the Australian tour and all that.
Yeah.
And it's a huge tour. And at the end of it, they make a loss. They made a loss partly because he put chickens in hotel rooms. He caused all sorts of damage.
He managed the band really, I think, through the kind of Rumours period as well, because they'd fallen out with Clifford Davis, who was their original manager. And I think Mick sort of became unofficial manager. But he spent so much money. And on the Tusk tour, he was saying, look, we've got to cut back. We've got to cut back because the sales figures were coming in for Tusk and it wasn't doing the numbers Rumours were. But everybody still insisted on having the best hotel suites. Everybody wanted a limo each. And he could never say no to them. And so at the end, the accountants were like, well, where's the money? They had made some money, but it was a ridiculous amount. And yet they'd squandered it. They'd squandered it on champagne and drugs and, as you say, chickens, filling the tour manager's hotel suite with chickens as a joke for his birthday. But then, of course, they shat everywhere and they had to clean the whole thing up. And this is a big high-end hotel in San Francisco. So he footed the bill for that. It sort of becomes symbolic of the stupidity and the excess. And at the end of that tour, the band fire him as their manager. But of course, he's still the drummer, but it's like, no, Mick, you can't look after.
You can't manage any longer.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Going back to your point about if there was a Fleetwood Mac still, he would be out there. He would hang on. During that controversial period, I don't know when it is, the mid-70s, when Clifford Davis, as you say, the manager, apparently tried to launch another group called Fleetwood Mac. There are people who think that Mick Fleetwood was always supposed to be part of that new group. I mean, what do you think of this?
I think he probably was, but I think he, who was it? The guy, Elmer Gantry, the guy that was, I can't remember his name now.
No, I can't remember.
But he talked quite openly about it and said, look, we were told Mick was going to join up.
He was going to join the tour later.
He was going to join them, get a drummer in the meantime. He was going to join them, but it sort of all went wrong. But I love the fact that when the first gig they played, only a few people asked for their money back. Most people didn't realise that it was the same Fleetwood Mac. The promoter did and challenged Clifford Davis about it. And there's a story that Clifford punched him. This is Fleetwood Mac. Fleetwood Mac is who I say is Fleetwood Mac. I did bump into the guy that was playing the bass with that band once at some do, and I said, "Oh, were you in the fake Fleetwood Mac?" He went, "Yes, I was," and walked off quite quickly.
Oh, really?
This is a few years ago. It was up at Olympia, and I was like, "Oh dear, maybe I shouldn't have said it."
No.
But it's the greatest near miss story in the history of rock and roll, isn't it? Imagine you thought you were signed up as the bass player, you were going to be playing alongside Mick Fleetwood. And then, probably 6 months later, Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks were going to join the group, and you were going to go on to massive worldwide success.
Exactly. I think those musicians probably, got a raw deal.
Definitely. I'm sure
they saw about it still.
Yeah, and but we'll never really know what happened. But that whole period was just a total mess. And that's the period they moved to America.
Yeah.
Although they were doing more touring a lot in America and more successful there than in the UK, that's the decision, is we've got to get our house in order and move to LA. And Christine McVie particularly did not want to move out of England. Absolutely not.
Because she, let's just talk about her, because it's only in the fullness of time people have realized how important Christine McVie was to the group. But is it Stevie Nicks says Christine McVie is the one who wrote the really big hits? Is that?
Yeah, she did. Yeah, absolutely. And but she didn't want to be in the band. She had no interest in being in the band. I mean, she'd had this bit of success with Chicken Shack and a solo artist, and she had stage fright, and she missed John McVie. She married John McVie, and she said, "I really miss John when he's on tour. I just want to stay at home and be his old lady." I mean, that's what he said in an interview, I think, in 1968, and she did. And then she moved when they all lived in a communal house in Hampshire, which sounds horrendous. Let's be honest.
Oh, Kiln House. That's a great period.
It's a great period.
It's a wonderful dream. Didn't she do the cover picture? I think she did, actually.
She did. She drew that lovely cover.
And it's done as a sort of hippie idyll, isn't it? It was an absolute nightmare.
But it just sounds dreadful. And it's like,
you can smell the veg curry. Oh,
you can. That was her job, making. And she goes, "Oh, I used to make stews and roll joints and dye T-shirts for the boys." And you just think she's sitting there. It's like, "Boy, I can play a bit of piano." And anyway, they're going to go on tour in America, and they realize it doesn't sound very good. And they need another instrument. They need another. And she knew the song. So they said, "Oh, will you come on tour with us and play piano?" "Oh, okay." And of course, she turns out to be fantastically talented songwriter, singer, and absolutely crucial to their
I never
success.
get tired of the story of Songbird, which she put in there, where she wrote the song in the middle of the night, but didn't have any recording equipment, did she?
No, so she just had to keep sitting there playing it.
The studio didn't open until 9 a.m. She just stayed up all night playing it over and over again in case she forgot it, didn't she?
Yes. Yeah, that's
rushed to the studio, humming it in her head. It's amazing.
Yeah, but the story is full of these sort of strange serendipitous moments, aren't they? Things like that.
Right. So, and John McVie, tell us about him. What's his key?
I think John McVie is absolutely hilarious. He's fabulous character, because he'd spent the entire time, I think, in Fleetwood Mac, not really knowing what he's doing, why he's there, and thinking he just rides out the storm. His marriage breaks up. His wife, Christine, goes off with different people. He still sort of sticks around. I just think him and Mick Fleetwood became sort of codependent. It was like this strange relationship. Whatever else happens, they would always stay together. But he just often seems quite baffled by everything that's going on around him, and having to tolerate these enormous egos and these sort of musical genius of Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks and so on. But he just quietly sits there with his bandana on, plays his bass, and then buggers off and sails his
wishing
boat.
He was on his yacht. That's
He's on his yacht at any opportunity.
Because he disappears for months at a time, doesn't he?
Yeah, it's rammed by a whale or something.
That's right.
To Tahiti. In the video for Tusk, the single, they have a cardboard cutout of him. Because
he's at sea, isn't he?
That's right. Yeah, and I mean,
and then he comes back every now and again, just does a load of bass parts, and jumps back in his boat,
and then buggers off again. I spent time with him when I went out to America to do the Fleetwood Mac reunion tour. I interviewed them all then, and I spent an hilarious evening in the bar of the hotel with Mick Fleetwood and John McVie. John was in his cups on stage. There's no two ways about that. He still had his stage gear on. He had this fabulous bandana that had gone over one eye, so he looked like Pugwash.
Henny Hill.
He sat there in a hotel lobby bar signing autographs and chatting away about the Railway Hotel in Wealdstone. And because I lived in West London, I drew a map of Harrow for him because I was living there, and he wanted to know where places were. And he was just a happy man with a few drinks inside him. But he couldn't believe, I think, how lucky he'd been.
That's the thing, isn't it? Yeah. When you realize, again, going back to John Mayall, all those millions of players going through the John Mayall band, and most of them just disappear.
Well, Mayall kept trying to sack McVie. being drunk on stage and falling over.
Even early on, the signs were there.
Yeah. The signs were there, but he kept getting McVey back because he said he was the best. It was a great bass player. He's a brilliant bass player, and I think he's so underestimated in that band. That's the thing that joins.
He is, because he doesn't do anything demonstrative, so people don't notice him.
No, they don't.
Kind of what he doesn't do that kind of matters, really.
Yeah. It's so funny. It reminded me of the Tusk video, though, because I watched that not long ago. And that is the kind of high point of late 70s, 80s rock star madness, as that whole video is. Let's get, what is it? The Californian University marching band into a stadium. Yeah. And they will play live. They were doing that live, weren't they?
They were doing it live, and the record company refused to pay for it. And so Mick Fleetwood put it all on his credit card and maxed it out. But when they got there, they realized the band could only play while they were marching.
Yes.
They can't play standing still. So Ken Kalat, the co-producer, and his team, they found a way of getting them to march on the spot, and mic'd it up in such a way that you didn't get too many footsteps. So the band are stood there, although you see them marching around in the video, for the actual recording, they're all marching on the spot, being recorded in this football stadium.
Yeah. And there's Christian McVey and Stevie Nicks both wandering around with huge glasses of white wine.
That's right.
He's got this goblet of white wine. And
they're not pretending, are they?
No,
that's how they spent the day, basically.
Yeah, and Stevie Nicks does a wonderful bit of cheerleading. She starts twirling the back. He's obviously been trained. I love that. I love the song and I love the video. I never tire of watching it.
No, absolutely.
See something new each time.
But the story of Stevie is it really comes out in the book that, it's about the ascent of Stevie in some ways, because she arrives, doesn't she, as a kind of part of a package deal. They want Lindsey, and therefore they've got to accept Stevie. And very soon she makes herself absolutely indispensable.
Absolutely.
To the point where there's a moment when they go on tour. I think, was it with Becca Bramlett and Dave Mason? I can't remember. And it's just the low point. And there's no Stevie, and there's no Lindsey, and there's no Christine. And they just can't function. And she's the one person they can't function without.
No, she holds all the cards now. I mean, that I think particularly
the top hat too, kind of making her. She becomes a kind of symbol of Fleetwood Mac, doesn't she?
She does become symbol of Fleetwood Mac. Yeah, definitely. But she, again, very insecure about her position at the beginning, because they wanted the hotshot boyfriend guitarist. But she made herself indispensable, and I think she gave them a front person as well in that. Yeah. Because that's the other thing. You've got three singers, if you include Christine as well, obviously. So, but she sort of becomes a visual focal point. And she, like I say, she becomes almost bigger than the band.
You see, that's my argument. Yeah. And it clearly, the day that they decided they were going to let her join as well was the key turning point in Fleetwood Mac. Because without Stevie Nicks, they're the Doobie Brothers. They look like that. And seriously, Lindsey Buckingham works alongside Stevie Nicks because they're a drama. They're a couple, aren't they? You know what I mean? What's going to happen next? They're just perfect. Whereas if she's not there and Christine's at the back, they're the Doobie Brothers. They're another anonymous kind of Californian group. And I'm fascinated still by this business that before they agreed that Stevie was going to join, they had to ask Christine if she minded.
That's right.
Another chick, which is probably the expression they would have used at the time.
Yeah.
Being in the band. But she didn't, did she? I mean, she did.
Well, she did admit, I think, in one of the last interviews, that there was a period where she was a little bit resentful when she saw how much attention Steve. She's very honest about that. She said, I did feel a bit jealous when she saw throwing herself around the stage. But her point was that I couldn't do that.
No, there was nothing.
She couldn't play the piano properly. And this was always one of the things. Christine would often get these little slight digs in, I have to say.
Right.
Yeah.
She'd go, well, Stevie would have a piano in her hotel suite, but she couldn't play it properly. And then she'd drift through the studio, and Stevie Nicks would be on her sort of Fender Rhodes going, Christ, are you writing another one?
Writing another song.
but this is it. I think it was very, very gracious of it. But they were strength in numbers because the two of them really come very, very close, genuinely very close. And it gave them, there was a barricade against these silly blokes in the band and everything else that was going on around it. And that I think that the relationship between Stevie Nicks and Christine McVie is also crucial to the success of the band.
And it is in terms of the kind of longer narrative of the group. And one of the reasons why they're still enormously popular nowadays is because they're really popular with women, with young women. They're popular for the same reason Taylor Swift is popular. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so Fleetwood Mac have journeyed from being the most blokey band you could possibly imagine to being a band that most people probably see as female.
Yes,
my children probably do. They probably don't think about Mick Fleetwood. They think about Stevie Nicks and Christine.
No, I mean, this is it. When you went to Fleetwood Mac shows and Stevie Nicks played Hyde Park a couple of weeks ago, people are dressed up like her. I saw this when I went to Fleetwood Mac at the O2 a couple of times. You will see
top hats,
women, mums and daughters tottering up that escalator.
Yeah.
Mad heels
with a top hat hanging off. No, nobody's going there dressed as John McVie, are they? Sadly,
there are no wooden testicles. I hope.
No, it's none
away as they go up the stairs. Yeah.
Oh God! So let's talk about Lindsey Buckingham, who, by his own admission, is difficult. How is he difficult? I've never met him.
I've met Lindsey Buckingham many times. He reminds me a bit of Kevin Kline in A Fish Called Wanda. There's something about him. He's got that sort of intensity about him, although he's softened up a bit over the years. He just takes his music very, very seriously. I remember doing an interview with talking to John McVey, and he goes, "Oh, have you spoken to Lindsey yet?" I said, "No, not yet." He went, "Oh God, it's all about the music." He was just moaning about him. But I think that intensity and that passion was absolutely crucial to that band because he saw them as something he could mold. And there was probably resentment about it. But I do think that without him, you would not have had that success. He is as crucial as Stevie Nicks, just in a different sort of way.
But his level of
must eat him up. It must eat him up that he's never had success on his own, really.
No, because many of the songs as well, that particularly on Tango in the Night, were songs he was going to have on a solo album. But if same songs had come out on a solo album, they wouldn't have been hits. But by putting them into the Fleetwood Mac machine, they, Big Love became a hit. He wouldn't have been a hit if he'd done it on his own. And he sort of resigned to it now. But I think the solo career was like a sort of pressure valve. He has to sort of conform in Fleetwood Mac and adjust to the other two singers. And then he'll go off and make these sort of esoteric solo records. I mean, there's some great stuff on his solo records, but they just do not connect with audiences the way that Stevie Nicks' stuff does.
And the moment that they called his bluff, really, didn't they? Well, or he called their bluff when he sort of said he was leaving and they were going to tour. And they said, "Well, we'll do it without you." And he just, I think, arrogantly imagined that would be impossible. And then it took two people to replace him.
He's always replaced by two people. Yeah. In the 80s, it was Billy Burnett and Rick Vito. And then obviously more recently, Neil Finn and Mike Campbell.
Yeah.
It takes two to be replaced.
So he has at least got that consolation. That's right.
It's a very weird musical relationship, though, isn't it? Because if you're John McVie and Mick Fleetwood, you do your parts for Tusk or whatever in probably a week. And in the old days, in a day, probably, but a week. And then it's over to Lindsey. And God knows what Lindsey's doing for the next 2 years.
Yeah, that's exactly like that. I mean, I think when they made Tango in the Night, he insisted on recording it in his own home, in his studio. And he put he hired a Winnebago to have on the driveway, which is where Mick Fleetwood could go and sort of sleep off if he'd been out on the town with Robin Williams all night. doing this, that, and the other. He'd Mick Fleetwood would turn up, and Lindsey was like, "I don't want you lot in my house."
No, sure.
Fleetwood turned up with his hangers on. They'd be put in the Winnebago while he was doing stuff. I mean, Christine McVey said she'd give him his songs, and she'd sit around the pool going, "Do you need me?" "No, not yet." And she goes, "I didn't really know what he was doing with my songs." But then they come out as Little Lies and Everywhere, which is, of course, two of the biggest.
Yes.
And it becomes more and more eccentric, does it? Because there's one song that he recorded, I think, when doing press-ups. Am I right?
Yeah, that was on Tusk. Yeah, doing. Yeah, I think, or Not That Funny. Is that on Tusk? Is that on Tusk? Yeah, that's on Tusk.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So otherwise, I got it horribly wrong. But yeah, he recorded it doing press-ups. This is when he went through this period where he did an interview. He said to me, he said, I wanted to be in the Clash. So he sort of cut all his hair off, and
he did, didn't he?
Did all that. He went through a big sort of stylistic makeover.
Yeah.
Right at the beginning, I think, of the Tusk tour. So he turns up for the opening night with this new sort of short haircut and an Armani suit on, and like everyone's sort of slightly appalled, I think.
Yeah, Armani suit, very Clash.
Yes.
Hadn't quite got it right. Top end Clash.
I'm very interested in that idea that he's clearly an extraordinarily talented person, but he kind of has no common touch, does he?
No, he doesn't. No. That's why you needed Stevie Nicks. You sort of to focus. I mean, they're both away with the fairies in
yeah, well, they are.
They are
in different ways. She's kind of showbiz, isn't she?
She's massively showbiz, and he's not showbiz. It really is all about the music. But it's that yin and yang. It's that brilliant combination. I can only say good things about Lindsey Buckingham as a musician, because I do.
He's fantastic.
He's done some great work. He really, and the band sorely miss him when he's not around.
Well, they're just putting out this compilation of the best of Lindsey Buckingham, aren't they? All these of his really good solo albums, and I've been listening to that, and it is remarkable. If you think you listen to too much Fleetwood Mac, which we would probably all have without intending to, go and listen to those Lindsey Buckingham solo records. They're fantastic. Because they're so like Fleetwood Mac. They're like Fleetwood Mac demos, I suppose.
They are, exactly. And many of the songs on Fleetwood Mac were Lindsey Buckingham demos, weren't they?
Yeah. So let's talk about
We should talk about the romances as well.
Oh, go on.
I do think that's an interesting thing. It's a bit like ABBA. Dave and I talked about this the other day. There's something about the internal relationships in ABBA that give ABBA's music a sense of poignancy. And it's exactly the same with Fleetwood Mac.
Yes, it is.
Fleetwood Mac music has Fleetwood Mac music is a sort of soundtrack to a great romance and a drama and internal tensions, which gives it a real richness, I think, actually.
It must be so strange to be doing this stuff, because Stevie Nicks has never married or had children, but Lindsey Buckingham did. He got married and had kids when he was in his early 50s.
Yeah.
And it must be the strangest thing to when you go to work, you are effectively picking away at the scabs of this relationship
you
had years before. And you see it particularly on tour, and you go, are they acting? Because they'll walk on stage and off stage holding hands, and you get the impression they probably don't even speak to each other once.
Yeah.
There is a degree of acting in it, but there was a clip from one of the tours, the last tour they did when they were all together, and Stevie Nicks just started crying in the middle of one of the songs. I think it was Landslide. And it was just one that her and Lindsey Buckingham performed together. And it looks like he's going to start sobbing. And I remember watching it and thinking, what on earth is going on?
Yes.
What is going through their minds? What's going through Lindsey Buckingham's wife's mind?
Oh, God, yeah. I always think about that song.
I think about this all the time.
No, I agree with you.
You go, I remember Stevie Nicks going, oh, it's so wonderful. Lindsey's got kids. It's lovely. He's got daughters. He takes them to ballet. I've been around the house and I've seen it. I thought, I bet his missus loves you guys.
Yeah.
It's Stevie again.
Yes.
Tell her
Auntie Stevie. Oh, God. But I'm amazed that there were still parts of this incredibly complicated kind of love dodecahedron, or whatever you would call it, that I didn't know. I didn't know that Sandra Elston, the black man,
yes,
had gone out with John McVey later on. I mean, I didn't. That was Peter Green's old girlfriend. He wrote a song about. Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, they sort of moved, but he became so insular. I think they sort of had to have affairs with each other because they wouldn't let anyone else in. That's
right.
Created this.
Those are the only available people.
That's it. And Sandra Elston is now, I think, a psychoanalyst.
That was the thing I thought was
I'm
just
sure she's
perfect.
very busy.
She was a model. She was a model in the 60s, clearly gorgeous.
Yeah.
And now she's a psychotherapist in Santa Monica or whatever. That's the journey. It's a long period of time, It's got, it's never mind the Timothy Chalamet Bob Dylan movie. This is the movie, Fleetwood Mac, because it's a bloody saga, isn't it? You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And also Stevie goes out with Derek Taylor, the Beatles press-off agent, I don't think I knew that either.
No, she wrote a song about it called Beautiful Child, but she kept quiet about that until after Derek Taylor had died. But then again, Derek Taylor was working for Warner's, so that song's on Tusk. So he's effectively involved in promoting an album that was underperforming at Warner's, and there's a song about him on but I don't know if he knew or told anyone. You imagine those conversations in the boardroom. Derek, what are we going to do about Tusk? It's not doing the numbers, Oh, well, yes, It must be the strangest thing.
Really odd.
We spoke to we did one of these chats with Jenny Boyd not long ago, who was fantastic, wasn't she, Mark?
Really fantastic. Yeah.
Which you tend to, very often these people who've been through an enormous amount, they're a bit away with the fairies in their later age. She was completely, I thought, seemingly undamaged by the extraordinary roller coaster. Married to Mick Fleetwood twice. Was that the case?
That's right, twice. Yeah, they broke up. Then she remarried him, and then they broke up again. Again, that's one of the things that comes across is just how much she probably had to put up with as well. Between her and her sister, Patty, who was called George Harrison.
Yeah,
they must have been consoling each other on a daily basis about what was.
And Jenny had a fling with Bob Weston, didn't she, at one point?
She did, yes.
Right, yeah.
Who was the guitarist in Fleetwood Mac briefly, and resulted in him being fired.
That's the reason he was booted out. That's right.
Fleetwood carried on the band with him, which shows that he was putting the band ahead of everything, including his marriage.
Yeah.
And then they got to Lincoln, Nebraska, and he went, "No, I can't deal with this anymore." So the tour manager, John Courage, who was an extraordinarily abrasive man that I met later on, Courage sort of banging on his Bob Weston's hotel door in the morning, and it's like, "Here's your ticket off." They put him on a plane home, and he's like, "I destroyed my career." He said, "I destroyed my career sort of over a love affair that didn't last." So there was no happy ending for there.
Yeah. So it was, it's the collateral damage of this fantastic success story is there for everybody to see, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah,
there's a lot of people who are affected by these things.
Yes, it sort of had this domino effect on all sorts of lives, didn't it?
Right. But now it is no more. So Stevie Nicks has announced that post the death of Christy McVey, there will be no more Fleetwood Mac. Do you believe that?
I think I am inclined to believe that now, just because I think they're reaching a certain age as well. I mean, she's still touring and doing great business
which is extraordinary.
It's absolutely incredible.
It's 30 years. 30 years this week, I think I'm right in saying, since the release of Belladonna, which kind of came out and you thought, oh, it's a Stevie Nicks solo album. It's got a Tom Petty song on it. And people still talking about it 30 years later. She's playing. Was she in Hyde Park the other week?
She played Hyde Park.
You were saying a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah. It's she's become bigger and bigger, I think, off the back of the Fleetwood Mac. She's been able to really springboard that, I think, over here as well, because she was always huge in America, but she didn't tour here.
No, I suppose
do
not.
Solo stuff over here at all. I don't remember her coming over on her own in the 80s or in the 90s. I don't think.
So the people who go and see Stevie Nicks, I'm guessing now, are not particularly original fans. They're people who've caught up with her in the 30 years since.
Yes, I think so. I think not exclusively, obviously, but I think definitely, yeah. There's a different sort. She's got a slightly different sort of following, I think.
Yeah. But it is. Go on, Mark.
I was going to say, was there any moment with ABBA? I mean, obviously ABBA ceased to exist, but there were moments where you could identify where they kind of made a comeback, if you like. So, were there any significant events in the Fleetwood Mac story that ensure that they would now be on this kind of huge plateau that they're on now, this kind of eternal standing?
Well, I think obviously Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks joining, I think.
Yeah.
And then I think
subsequent to that, I'm talking
subsequent to that, I think the Bill Clinton thing when
Clinton,
inauguration where they gaffer taped the tambourine bells. They handed Stevie Nicks hands a tambourine to Bill Clinton to play on stage while they're doing Don't Stop, and they gaffer taped the bells because in case it sounded too dreadful if he was out of time.
Right. Well, I was led to believe that they'd gaffer tape the bells anyway for her.
But it may well have done, yeah.
That was just her tambourine, wasn't it?
Possibly. But I think the inauguration of Bill Clinton was a big thing, but it still took them a few years to actually get back and do that big reunion tour. And I think after that, I think it's the songs started to appear in Hollywood.
Yeah. There's a mobile phone ad, wasn't there? With
the mobile phone ad with Dancing Pony for
everywhere. Yeah.
Which Christine McVey was like living as a recluse at the time. She left the band. She didn't go out. She's in her mansion watching CSI Miami or something, which was one of her, or Have I Got News for You, one of her favorite programs, and flicking around. And then she suddenly she sees this Dancing Pony to her song.
Yes.
It's things like that, and then the Chain turning up in Guardians of the Galaxy and various Hollywood, and younger people go, well, what's that song? They're straight on Spotify. The that it came out.
Yeah,
I always think the remarkable thing about Fleetwood Mac is that their records sound completely contemporary to modern ears.
Yeah,
was it made alongside Taylor Swift? It could well have been.
It could easily have been, and it's such a big influence on a lot of new country as well. A lot of huge country artists, I think, that come through since the 90s and 2000s. They all took Rumours as a starting point. It's not so different. You can trace a line, definitely.
Yeah.
And Daisy Jones and the Six you mentioned too, which I thought was interesting, which is a kind of, Dave was saying earlier that someone should make the film of Fleetwood Mac, but that is that's based on the idea of Fleetwood Mac.
It was based on it because the writer saw the video, saw the DVD or video or whatever of the dance, which was the 97 reunion tour as a kid. And I think the younger teenager or whatever, and was fascinated by the dynamic between Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks, particularly on a song called Silver Springs, which is a Stevie Nicks song where they start singing the lines at each other. It's all very accusatory and all very dramatic. And she was absolutely taken by this and wrote a story about a band in the 70s with a couple, and it mirrors the Fleetwood Mac story, the Lindsey and Stevie dynamic perfectly.
There's also this new big hit on Broadway, isn't there? This play, is it called Stereophonic, which features a band very much like Fleetwood Mac trying to make Tusk, or trying to make
that's a new one.
It all takes place in a recording studio. It's supposed to be absolutely brilliant. It transferred from off Broadway to on recently, so it may have a long future ahead of it. So finally, of all the millions of stories in this book, there are a million stories in the Naked City. This has been one of them. What's your favorite?
My favorite is the fake Fleetwood Mac. And also the fact that there was a fake Jeremy Spencer.
Jeremy Spencer.
A fake Peter Green.
Tell us that story. It's incredible, isn't it?
Well, the fake Jeremy Spencer, guy turns up claiming to be Jeremy Spencer. And Jeremy Spencer was a guitarist who joined the Children of God and left the band and not been seen. And this guy turns up and he's so convincing that he convinces a chap called Bob Brunning, who was the bass player in Fleetwood Mac before John McVey, just for a couple of months. And he knew Jeremy. He used to share a flat with Jeremy. He took him to the pub and went, oh, yeah, that is Jeremy. Something's a bit off, but I think that's Jeremy. And lets him join his deluxe blues band. And they play a gig at the Wimbledon Theatre, which is attended by the real Jeremy Spencer's mum and dad, who are there to see what they believe is their son. And they take Bob Brunning aside after the show and went, that is not Jeremy.
Doesn't he spend some of the gig with his back to the audience because he realised Jeremy Spencer's parents are out there?
And this had all been announced in the Evening Standard ad-lib column, and they then had to print. They then discovered it wasn't the real Jeremy Spencer, and they had to print a retraction a few days later. And this guy, we never really found out who he was, but he'd been impersonating Jeremy Spencer elsewhere. by all accounts, and then he just sort of disappears.
This is the majesty of Fleetwood Mac. You just pull one thread. I mean, Jeremy Spencer, we haven't even talked about. Jeremy Spencer was kind of the star when it was Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac.
Yes, he was.
He was a showman.
He was the looker. Yeah.
Dressed as a greaser. He used to do the Elmore James tunes, all that kind of stuff. Somebody's going to get their head kicked in tonight.
Yeah.
All that. And then in 1971, I think I'm right in saying, he just buggers off before a sound check in a show in LA, is it? He's kind of never seen again, effectively.
Never seen again. No, turns up again 9 months later, backstage.
As a member of the Children of God.
As a member of the Children of God. And he's still a member of the Children of God now, living.
No.
Yes, he is.
Yeah. Yes, he is. And I've interviewed him a couple of times. He's extremely cagey about his early days in Fleetwood Mac and his tendency to run on stage at the marquee with a dildo sticking out and things like that.
Not very Children of God.
Not very Children of God at all. He did
on brand.
He got up and did a wonderful performance, I have to say, at the Peter Green tribute concert in 2020. Got up and did, I think, I can't remember the track now. It was Skies Crying or whatever. It was fantastic playing. He was very, very good. But yeah, there was a fake Jeremy Spencer, and there was a fake Peter Green in the 90s who scammed a record deal and scammed.
That's right, you got that. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's a farmer. He's an egg and potato farmer in Essex.
Oh, that's fantastic.
You couldn't make it up.
You can't, and it isn't made up. It's all in Dreams, The Many Lives of Fleetwood Mac. All this and much more from Mark Blake, which is out now. Mark, it's been lovely to talk to you.